Hello students, so we have finished the last chapter and the last unit for the syllabus, and so starting from this video onwards we'll be starting the revision. So starting from unit 1, that is the object oriented programming. So we'll start with the first chapter, that is the review of C++. And since you're already familiar with this review, so I'm sure that most of you or all of you will have no problem catching up with this. So I'll be speaking only on the important, touching on the important points. Right, so the rest of you try to catch up using the textbook. Right, so the first one is, what is C++? Now C++ is a superset of C programming language. So this C++, it was formed from the C programming language, and it supports both procedural and object oriented programming. What was lacking in C programming language was this object oriented programming. Alright, so this C++ had included new features in this object-oriented programming, which we shall see in the later chapters. Okay, so when it says it supports both procedural and object-oriented, when you talk about procedural, you are talking about the modules, the function-oriented programming or modular approach. All right, so when we're talking about object-oriented program, we are talking about the different features such as encapsulation, okay, the data abstraction, polymorphism, inheritance, objects and classes, constructor, destructor, and so on. Now, how are C++ programs written? So C++ programs are composed of characters. So these characters belongs to ASCII code set, or American Standard Code for Information Interchange, which we have already seen if you remember in the number system. Alright, so C++ uses the following character sets. So using these character sets, we can form the C++ language, or we can write down the C++ programming language. So we use alphabets or letters, which is uppercase A to Z and then lowercase a to Z. Alright, and then we use numbers or digits 0s to 9. So based on 0 to 9 we can form all the numbers, and we use all of the special characters which you find in the keyboard, so each has a name on that. Right, so these are punctuators through which we can perform different types of operations on the C++ programs. Right, so first one is C++ token. So a token is the smallest unit of the C++ program. Alright, so now character sets are combined to form tokens. So using the character sets we can form tokens such as keywords, operators, punctuators, constants, statements as such. Okay, so when we combine those character sets, it forms a token, and tokens is comprised of these keywords, operators, punctuators, constant statements, single line statement, compound statement as such. Okay, so collectively they are called as tokens. So here if you can see in this example, int sum equals to 100 semicolon, it has 5 tokens, that is int sum equal to 100 and semicolon. As you can see that int, it is you use alphabets. sum, you are using alphabets. So when you combine them, the compiler understands that this is integer, this is a variable name, this is the assignment operator, this is the data value, and this semicolon denotes the termination of this line statement. So now keywords. What are keywords? So keywords are predefined reserved words which are identified by the compiler, and it is used as it is. So keywords are not user defined, they are reserved words, they are already predefined, alright, in the library function file. So you cannot change the name of these keywords like class, return, switch, cons, else, call to, if, in. Okay, so there are many keywords which you'll find in your textbook. Go through all of them. Okay, so else you cannot change the name. Go to, you cannot change it. If you cannot write is, int you cannot write integer. in full form. All right. So now next comes the important one, that is what are variables. So now a variable is one that holds certain values temporarily. Keep in mind that it does not hold the value permanently but temporarily. So what is a variable? Is a user defined name. Now this is predefined, this is user defined. So here you can see that this is a variable sum. So this is a user defined. That means it depends on the user if he or she wants to change from sum to summation or sum to add, different types of names based on the user. So given of the memory location, so that there is no need to remember the memory address. So a variable is actually a name for the memory location where the data is stored. Alright, since we humans, we cannot remember the memory address, so using the variable name we can remember where the data is stored, and we can locate where the data is stored in the memory. Alright, so the compiler allocates memory based on the data type once variable is declared. So only when the variable is declared, the compiler allocates memory for to store the data in the memory location. Right, so based on the data type, the size of the memory will be allocated by the compiler for that particular variable. So now what is data type, which we shall see in the next page. So declaring and initializing a variable. Now how do you declare a variable and how do you initialize a variable? So now a variable is declared to assign memory location for the data values. So we declare a variable because only when we declare a variable, the memory space will be allocated for the data values. So declaring a variable actually informs the compiler the following things, that is name of the user defined variable and then the data type of the variable. So like here int sum, so this is declaring. Alright, so it tells the compiler that you are declaring a user defined variable name called a sum, and its data type is int, so which means that it can store integer values only. So based on that, the compiler will allocate memory. Suppose like for integer the size is 2 bytes, so based on that the compiler will allocate 2 bytes of memory for this variable sum, and it ends with a semicolon. Alright, so we can also initialize a variable during declaration by using the assignment operator equal to. So that is assigning a value. So here int sum equals to 100 is the assigning value 100 to sum, which means that some variable is assigned this value and some variable will hold this value, data value 100 in the, as long as this program is running, okay, or as long as this value does not change. So that's why a variable is just a temporary storage location. As long as the program runs, okay, that variable will store the value. Now there are certain rules to define a variable, so which is variable names can be short as a single letter. So suppose like int s, alright, so a single letter, or it can be up to 255 characters long, but only the first 32 characters will be considered. Only the first 32 alphabets will be considered for the variable. Alright, so as far as possible, keep the variable names as short. So variable names must always begin with alphabet, or you can start with underscore, but most preferably start with alphabet. Alright, now variable names cannot be reserved words, which we have just seen, keywords. So a variable name can never be a keyword. So suppose like int is a keyword, right? So you cannot write int int. You cannot use the variable name as int, because if you write int, then the compiler will detect that okay, this is not a variable name. So you cannot have two data types written at the same time, which will result in error. So no blank spaces are allowed between variable names. So that means if this is a variable name, no blank spaces will be allowed. You have to continue the variable names using an underscore, right? So no special characters except underscore is allowed. If at all you need to separate the variable names, you need to use an underscore, right? Or you have to join it, or you can use you can also use after the alphabet or underscore, you can also use more letters or digits. Right, so digits, numbers can also be allowed, provided it is not used first. Now, so data types. So a variable can hold different types of data, right? So different types of data, like so here, based on that, it can hold alphabets, it can hold numbers, it can hold decimal point values, it can hold negative numbers, it can hold positive numbers. All right, but it cannot hold, yes, the fractionals. Now, data types are the way to identify the types of data a variable holds. All right, so using the data type, the compiler is able to identify what type of data a variable will store, and then based on that, the memory size will be allocated to the variable. So if it is integer, that means in this case in sum, which tells the compiler that okay, it will store integer values from 0 to 9. Or if it is character, suppose like character name, that means it will hold alphabet values, right? So based on that, the size of the memory location also will be allocated to that particular variable. So now based on that, we have different types of data types, that is it can be categorized as follows. So we shall focus on these two main ones, all right, because this is included in the syllabus. So simple or fundamental data types, it is these are the basic data types based. So these are the most basic data types. It is also called as primitive data types, because based on that, you cannot you can form other data types also based on this. So here you have the examples such as like int, float, double, character, boolean. Bool stands for boolean, which means it evaluates to only two answers, which is true or false, which we shall see, which we have already seen in the previous unit. So in integer values, float, which stands for decimal point values, this also stands for decimal point values. This stands for character, which the compiler allocates 1 byte of memory, right? So 2 byte, 4 bytes, like that. So derived data types, now these are structured or derived from the fundamental data types, and we have already seen these data types such as arrays, function, structure, class, and pointer. Right, so we shall be seeing so we shall again go through all of these topics one by one, right? So in the next class we shall discuss more on the data types and literals and constants, operators as such.